Hey guys, it's Quana, and I'm back again with another review. And if you've been here already, this is my second time reviewing the newest episode of The Handmaid's Tale, episode 9, Heroic. So I'm going to get in really quickly because I'm supposed to be picking up my kids soon, but there were some problems with the audio with my first video, so I kind of wanted to just go ahead and jump right on in, which kind of sucks because the last one was really fun to do, and there were some crazy things going on. But I think because the kids were asleep, I was talking kind of quietly, and there were issues with like the audio and the way that it's synced in with the video. And so yeah, let's just do it all over again. So I have my notes. So let's go, and it starts with Belinda Carlisle's song "Heaven Is a Place on Earth" playing, which was not disturbing at first because Handmaid's Tale is actually, they quite prevalently use like popular songs from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, very recognizable songs. And so I was kind of, getting into my little vibe like, ooh, baby, do you know what that's worth? Ooh, heaven is a place on. I was bopping, and then we get faded away, and then June is saying, do you hear it? Do you hear it? And I'm like, yeah, we hear it. We dancing to it. But I'm like, wait a second. Why are you asking us? Why are you breaking the fourth wall and asking us if we hear it? And then we find out that she is in the hospital room of Matthew, where Matthew was taken after last week's episode, and there actually is no song playing, but what she's hearing is all of the machines and the dripping of the fluids, and in her head it's playing now this song because she has lost her mind. So she's narrating for us of Matthew's prognosis, and we find out that she's kind of in this catatonic state, this comatose state. They're keeping her alive so that she can have the baby, and she has to stay there until the baby comes. Now, on a regular basis, the wives, as well as the wife of Commander Calhoun, Matthew Calhoun, who of Matthew is pregnant by, comes to pray for the baby. The other handmaids come to pray for the baby. It's the only time that she actually gets some human interaction. And then there are these girls in pink who walk by, but June thinks that they're not real. And so one of the things that I thought was really interesting in this beginning opening scene, the cinematography throughout this episode was really on point, was really phenomenal. But I thought what was really interesting was she mentions when the wives are there, the smells. The various smells of everyone who comes to visit. She says that the wives smell of powder. And then she says the way that Serena Joy smelled, it reminds me of the ceremony when she was holding me down as her husband was raping me. And I was like, man, that cut, like that stark reminder, that visceral reminder of the fact that these women who are sitting here praying for this baby, and they're so pious and they're so holier than thou, are actually complicit in the rape of these handmaids. And it's just that reminder because we haven't seen a ceremony in quite some time. So it's a stark reminder of that. I think another reason why they included that in there is because it's a way to humanize June a bit more, which it shouldn't take rape to humanize someone, but because June has become so unlikable in her actions, because her actions have real ramifications for the other characters in the show, where people are dying in their attempts to help June, and she is very callously placing blame on other people, who the blame also rests on her own shoulders, and she's not actually taking ownership of that blame. I think this is the writer's way of like shifting that sympathy back to June. But for me, while it reminded me of that ceremony at the very beginning and drew back those callbacks to season 1, which I think was such a strong season, I still don't feel compassion for her as of that point. So during this moment, Matthew has a seizure, and Aunt Lydia is visiting and very concerned about what's happening. And we get the doctor, who's played by Gil Bellows, saying, we're going to do this procedure to help relieve some of the pressure, get some fluid to the baby, and the baby's going to be good. And so Aunt Lydia is impressed, and she's like, isn't this amazing, the miracle that these doctors can perform? And June is like, yeah, Aunt Lydia, can I go home now? I'm tired. And she's like, where would you go? This is your walking partner. And the psychological games that they're playing, and with Aunt Lydia, it's so hard to tell sometimes whether or not it's where her actions are based upon that psychology where she's trying to break someone, or whether it's just based in her own naivete. We did get the fact that last episode she acknowledges that she thought that June was supposed to be one of the good ones, and she's so disappointed in her. So I do think there's an element of her actions where this is meant to break her, but she then switches and has compassion for these girls at times, and it's like watching a tennis match. It's like this. It's like I don't know what to feel. Last I said in my last video that the last video, I did not feel compassion for Aunt Lydia based off of her backstory. It actually made me dislike her more. But there are moments when she's being so kind to Janine and she's being so caring and she's visibly heartbroken about what might happen to the girls that her humanity shows. But it's a reminder that a person can be racist, sexist, bigoted, and still have humanity. And it doesn't make it okay. Their humanity doesn't make their knowledgeable, harmful actions towards others okay. Put a pin in that and save that. Write that down. Anyhow, June gets this bright idea to go dig into the bio waste box and get a scalpel that one of the tenants had put in there. And so she's digging through this box, which was disgusting, and she gets a needle stuck in her finger, and I was so grossed out. I was like, oh, I'm gonna throw up. This is disgusting. Like, I just kept thinking like, oh, she's gonna get an STD, which of course we know there are no STDs in this new society because they've killed off probably everybody who's had one, and everyone has like this very medically approved sexual interactions for the most part, unless they're going to visit the prostitutes, where everyone is being checked and all of those things. So I know that that's very unlikely, but it was still just very disgusting. And eventually she does get a scalpel. That night she tries to convince Janine to help her kill of Matthew, and eventually Janine, who is the one who is like not crazy, or usually crazy, excuse me, and has to be like pulled off of a ledge literally, is the one who's like, no, you're crazy. This isn't helping her. This isn't good for her. You're being selfish. You don't care about other people. You did this. And it kind of triggers June for a second, but I don't think it triggers her in a way that she really takes ownership. She just says, you're right. I'm not going to kill of Matthew. I'm going to use this to do some good harm. And so the next day, she's looking at who could be her victim. Should she kill the doctor? Should she kill the Calhouns? And then she sees Serena Joy. She calls Serena Joy over. She's about to try to stab her. When she kind of falls faint, she's able to slash her arm, but then they struggle over the scalpel, and then June gets cut as well. Serena Joy, very nicely, mind you, because for all intents and purposes, at this point, June should be like getting ready to go to the chopping block, should be able to get ready to be hanged. And the doctor comes over and talks to her, and it's like, so how long have you been suicidal? I told them this wasn't a good idea. And she's looking at him like, I'm not suicidal. She's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, what would you call trying to kill one of the wives? They would kill you for this. You're suicidal. And ultimately they have this conversation where, one, we find out that the doctor knew June's mother, Holly, and who is a very strong woman, and so he's basically trying to reassure her like, you're strong too. We find out that his job is to care for the baby, not for the mother, and June tries to remind him that the mother is a person too, and maybe that's a way that she's going to slowly kind of breed these seeds of like getting people to see her as a human being, see others as a human being, and maybe that's one way that the tide can turn. But then we also hear him say to her, what are you doing for your children? Because I'm saving this woman's baby, which is what I'm doing for her. What are you doing for your children? And that kind of is the thing that really ultimately does snap June awake and make her realize she's being extremely reckless, and she's ruining any chance that she could have of saving Hannah, but then also saving maybe some of the other children in Gilead. So after this, Matthew has a seizure, and they have to perform a C-section so they can get the baby out. She has the baby. It ends up being a boy and not a girl, which gives everyone, in one sense, a sigh of relief. And finally, June can go home. On her way out, before she gets ready to leave, at some point in the show, and I don't remember when this happened, she encounters one of the little girls in pink. We find out that these girls are girls who've just had their first period and are now being tested to see if they can have kids. And so she has a conversation with this little girl who finds out that she'll one day get a chance to be a mother. And June's kind of asking her, is this what you want? And trying to get her to think about maybe being the next generation of people who fight back against Gilead. Ultimately, June decides to go back to the hospital after she's released and sit with Matthew until she dies. And she tells of Matthew, "I'm going to save your child. I'm going to try to save all the children." And she in attempt tries to make an amends, but it wasn't enough for me. And I think this was the writer's attempt at a hero's arc in which June, as our hero, has now reached her arc and has fallen, which all heroes do. You know, you can learn more about the hero's arc. But this was an incomplete rise because simply talking to an almost dead body in order to make amends and say, "I'm going to change my ways," to me is not enough of a rise. Because her actions have led to real death for characters, she is going to have to sacrifice herself, be saved somehow, but she's going to have to put her in my opinion, put her physical body on the line in order to rectify the wrong that she's done. And so in many ways, I think this season is very problematic storyline wise because we've gotten all these nuggets of information with Nicole being in Canada, the fight to get Nicole back, her being used as a ploy for propaganda, and then it's like, and then these so many storylines converging on each other, and it's not excuse me, it's not fulfilling, in my opinion, to June's personality. And so at this point, she is probably one of my least favorite characters on the show at this point. I will tell you, at this point, I almost like Serena Joy better than I like June, and that's extremely problematic, being that June is the main character. However, I could conceive a world in which Serena Joy actually has the true heroic arc and becomes the true hero of the story, and wouldn't that be amazing? The show is going to also, in my opinion, need to rectify its race problem. Moira and Luke are the only minority characters that are redeemable and layered, and yet we have seen very little of them this season. We had a Matthew who seemingly had some layers to her and was very interesting, although antagonistic, and now she's died. And I would have loved to have seen maybe a redemption arc for her and for her to become a significant help for June, because June doesn't have a character now in Gilead that she's extremely close with, except for that one handmaiden that I can never remember her name, and Janine. And the Martha who was Hannah's Martha is now dead. Rita is in the Waterford house. And so there's these characters who are of color, and obviously Gilead has a problem with color. We heard from Aunt Lydia last week who said that the one couple didn't want a handmaid of color. So there are actually issues in this world with people of color that still exist, and yet it's kind of like the show hasn't acknowledged that on the whole. And because June's actions have been so extremely problematic, mainly for other characters of color, the couple in the village or the city that she was hiding in their home or whatever, like there's just so many characters in the show you can kind of go back and look of color that she has directly led to their death. And as people are starting to notice that more in the think circles about this, and I don't think that we're trying to make everything about race, but it is notable that those have been those are characters that we've been given who have been harmed the most by June's actions. And June is going to have to atone for her actions, and it can't, because everyone in this world is traumatized, has been raped, has been molested, has been tortured, has been mutilated. It's not going to be enough to rest her own failings on the rape that she has endured, because it's happening with the other women as well. We can say that about of Matthew, that for as much as she wanted to condemn of Matthew for that Martha's death, of Matthew, all of Matthew knew was that she saw June talking to the Martha. She wasn't close enough to have heard any of the communication. So that ultimately rests more on June, because the Martha did not want to be communicating with her in public at all. And Matthew had just as many layers, if not more so, because she was extremely fertile and had been used and abused and raped far more than June. And it's not about a numbers game, but it is saying to me that she can't rest on that as a reason behind doing bad things and having bad behavior. She's gonna have to do better. So hopefully in the next few episodes that we have, because I don't know if we have 10 episodes this season or if it's 13. um so if you know, let me know in the comments. I haven't seen that, but hopefully very soon we will see a real atonement for June. We will see perhaps some of Moira, because I'm really sadly not getting enough of her this season, and we will get some real development on the plot so that we can see some of these storylines tie up. And ultimately, I think it would be kind of interesting if Serena Joy, you know, becomes the hero of the story or a hero of this world. Because she certainly is in a more position of power, where we're seeing now where people who are in positions of power and positions of privilege, they have to become allies. It's not enough for disenfranchised groups to fight for their own rights. They need people in positions of power. So hopefully we will ultimately see Serena Joy realize the missteps that she's made and come full circle. So that's what I thought about the episode. I thought overall the episode was good. I would give it a good solid 8 out of 10, maybe 7 or 8 out of 10. But it was very good, self-contained. It was interesting. The character study, the psychological study, it really reminded me of that episode of The Walking Dead, spoiler alert, where Daryl was captured by Negan and they kept playing that song again and again to drive him crazy. Except for this time, the song was in her head. And so I thought that was really interesting. I thought that the use of colors, again, is just always phenomenal with this. But I am ready now to get out of the self-contained episodes and to get back into our main plot line, which is the Waterford's attempt to get Nicole back from Canada. I know with next week's promo, it looks like we are potentially either going to get a forced ceremony of June by Commander Joseph. I don't know, I can't remember what his last name is, but either he's going to be forced to do the ceremony on June while others are watching, because she has obviously not been pregnant yet, and they're going to want to know why, or possibly an orgy ceremony, which is even more horrifying. But it's about time for them to up the horror on the show anyway, and the outrage on the show. So I'm gonna gird my loins and get ready for that. So until next time, drink lots of tea, take care of yourselves, and let's get ready for next week. Until then, friends, toodles.